May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the universal precept, within the constraints of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Alan Senauke, abbot of the Berkeley Zen Center. It's the second one with him, and I actually neglected. I think this, would be podcast number 100 with our Zen-related guests. Although there were, about 50 in the prior group, which I called chats. So I'm thinking after 100, I will add the two together. So the number of the podcast gives you an idea of how many people we have talked with. Like I said, this is the second part. It's not just the second podcast, but it's really the second part of the last podcast. Usually I do them, if it goes on like that, I put one week and the second one the next week. Or I put them, as close together as I can. And we did record this in time to do that. However, I forgot about it. It's right there in the list of, I keep a sort of queue up, who's next. And I'm running about 3 months ahead. Yeah, I think this one was done in April. This was done in April. I remember the last one, we talked about his book, which is a cool book, Turning Words, Transformative Encounters with Buddhist Teachers. We talked about that book on the first one. Actually, I don't remember what we talked about, but I'm sure we did. And on this one, he started telling what he'd done in his life. And it's all very interesting. A lot of music, a lot of work with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, a lot of writing, and it's a very interesting path. And we ended in 1976. So we picked that up with this one. So after we've had our pause to meditate, let's give Alan Senauke a call. So when you hear the bell, if you're in such a mood, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever, and give Alan Senauke a call.
Yeah.
All right. Alan.
Okay.
How are you doing?
Yes, David. I'm doing fine. How are you?
All right. It's a lovely sprinkling morning here. I always enjoy rain.
It was a beautiful spring evening, and at last we have some nice warm weather. Very pleasant.
Good. Well, now, do you happen to remember where we left off last week?
Not exactly. I don't think we got far into my actually coming to Berkeley Zen Center. I don't think we exactly got to my coming there in the 80s, which is when I arrived.
You know what you said? I can remember what you said. You had you had something else you had to do, and you said, I said, well, let's just take it up next week. And you said, yeah, we only got to 1976.
Right, that's right, exactly. So that's good. 1976. I 76. I left New York, started playing in a little band that was first in Ithaca and then moved to Boston, and I was there until about 1981, mostly on the road, playing bluegrass, old time music, etc. And that was mainly what I was doing. And then and I met some people that I was playing music with who were from California, and they wanted to come back to California. And I'm still playing with them. Actually, I played with my friend Eric Thompson in Santa Cruz at a house concert last night. So
Wow.
that was from, that was from 1977 to, here we go, in 2022.
Three.
So
2023.
23, right. So I moved to California, and I was in a band called the Blue Flame String Band, which was a wonderfully eclectic band. And it had all the usual kind of tensions that bands have. And at a certain point, I just felt like I didn't want to travel, that I didn't want to tour, and I was not happy with the psychological environment in the band, and I decided to leave. And at that point, I was in psychotherapy. I was living out here in Berkeley. And one day I approached my therapist, and so at this point I am, I was about 35 years old. I went to my therapist and basically asked her, what am I doing on this planet? And she said, that's not a psychotherapeutic question. That's a spiritual question. And I said, oh, that makes sense. And I started reading Buddhist-oriented stuff again because that seed had been planted. And I think that a couple of books that were really important to me were The Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson and The Empty Mirror by Werner Wettering.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, I just had the feeling, well, if they can do this Zazen thing, I could do this. And so I decided to, and but Berkeley Zen Center had moved. It wasn't on Dwight Way anymore. I didn't know where it was, so I found the number in the phone book, and I called them up. And, I said, well, I sat there in 15 years ago, and I want to begin to practice again. What should I do? And the person on the other end of the phone said, find a blank wall and sit down and stare at it. And I thought, I just thought, I can't believe this is what they're saying to an unknown person on the phone. This is my kind of place. And so I came here, and sometimes you have this sensation that you're home, right?
Yeah.
You walk in a place and you know you're home. I had that here at Berkeley Zen Center. I also had it about 5 years later when I arrived in Japan and walked into Rinso-in at the middle of the night. I just instantly felt at home. And I really feel like that's a home for me. And, I feel it with Nagaloka, the place I go to in India, the place I've been working. And, it's like I really pay attention to what feels like home. I totally trust that feeling. And at the time, so this was in mid to late 84, and Mel, I think, was in Japan doing Dharma transmission. And so he wasn't here for the first while that I was practicing. And so I really encountered the Sangha, and there were people that I looked up to and that I still look up to. Those are still here. And then when he showed up, it's like the last puzzle piece fell into place, the piece that was at the center of the mandala. And that made tremendous sense to me as soon as I encountered him. And that was it. I was home. I had a teacher. And, I had a very unusually traditional path of practice in the sense that I've been living here now since 1985. I had, Mel was my primary teacher, and he was my teacher for every ordination that I had, for lay ordination, for priest ordination, for shuso, for transmission. And it's very unusual to be with your teacher for nearly 40 years in this culture.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really amazing, unusual opportunity. And, it's not without its difficulties, but it's wonderful. And that's what I did. And, along in there, I met Lori, who was a Zen student, and she moved over here, and we had our family. We raised our family here, and, it's just like we did everything with this sense of Berkeley Zen Center as a place that was our home and still is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an outline. That doesn't go into any of the details of the life and practice here.
Mm-hmm. Well, feel free to go into any detail you want.
Yeah. Well, I hesitate to say this, but at some point I went to Tassajara. There was a kind of truncated practice period, a work period in, I think, the fall of 85, when they were rebuilding the old baths before they were building the new baths. And so the baths were kind of out of commission, and they did a 1-month practice period that I went to. And it was fantastic. And it was great because Mel kind of seconded me to the kitchen because they needed help. And so I got a lot of really good kitchen training from Fu was the Tenso, and Brian Fikes was the Fukuten. And it was a great experience. And one day, on a 5-9 day, we were having lunch in the dining room, and Mel was talking to somebody, Sarah Grayson. Did you know her?
Yeah.
And I was there at the table, and he was saying, well, I wish I had somebody who could sort of be my right hand, who took care of stuff. And he was talking to her. and I just had this flash that I was that person. And then I questioned it internally. I said, "That's ridiculous. How do you know that? You've hardly been here." But I felt very clear about that. And again, that was an intuitive moment. That was correct. And so, gradually I ended up with a whole variety of initially administrative responsibilities. And I really enjoyed that. I totally enjoyed throwing myself into the life of the Sangha. And I enjoyed my time at Tassajara, and it was a couple years later that I went to Tassajara for a full practice period with Reb. That was in I guess that was just like January to April of '88. And at that point, I was the first person for Berkeley Zen Center who had gone to Tassajara since Suzuki Roshi's days. And I just always had the feeling that this is one practice, that the Zen Center practice and the Berkeley Zen Center practice was all coming through Suzuki Roshi, and that these places were what we had inherited. And I felt great about that. I really enjoyed being in Tassajara. And that's really where I had met Lori before, but she was way senior to me. But at that point, she was Reb's assistant. And we hit it off. And actually, I got a ride after the practice period was over. I got a ride up to City Center that day, and went directly to City Center so that I could see Lori and ask her out. And I did, and it's like things went very quickly.
Please continue.
Along with that, simultaneously, when I was at Tassajara for that practice period, I started having chest pains. And this kind of mysterious illness went undiagnosed for the whole practice period, which is really dumb.
Yeah.
And when I came up here, then I really did some testing and found out that I had a blocked artery.
Wow.
And so our relationship evolved in the course of testing, failing tests, hospitalization, an emergency in the hospital, and, fear of death and all of this. And I felt like the universe was saying, here's your most cherished wish, and here's your deepest fear. You sort them out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was given to work with.
Did you get a stent?
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I continued, and I kind of rebuilt my health. And again, I was kind of fast-tracked. When I was at Tassajara, I met a whole crew of people who had recently been ordained by Reb. And they had been ordained, I think, just before this practice period. And they were my pals. I saw two of them last night at the concert in Santa Cruz. I saw Jaku and Shinchu.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they came to the concert. And, we've been friends since 88, since that practice period. But what I realized was that, the people that I was really relating to, these were priests. And it was, again, this feeling like, well, I could do that. And that I wanted to do that. That I, just like one yearns for a home, I was yearning for officially or spiritually to be in the family of the Buddhists and ancestors. And I began to have conversations with Sojin about that. And, his message to a lot of people were, when they approached him about being a priest, he said, just live like a priest and see how that is. And I did that. But as I said, things that happened fast. I had health crisis. Lori moved over here a few months later. We became engaged. We decided we were going to get married. I was ordained in the spring of 89, and then married in September of 89. And then by sometime in 1990, Sylvie was born. So all this stuff unfolded really quickly. And as I've often said to people, I would not have ordained me. Not with all that I had going on in my life, but I don't think it was the wrong decision for him or for me. And so, I found myself a new priest, a new father, and so on. And that was how our life unfolded. So I had to work, which was a problem, to find work. I worked for a time at the Buddhist bookstore on Bush Street.
No, you mean on Octavia?
On Octavia, yeah.
Right. I mean, Octavia and Bush. My gosh, you worked there.
I did.
Did you know Ogui?
Well, I knew Reverend Ogui, yeah, sure.
Oh,
but I met Reverend Ogui. I met him in Chicago.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's great. I saw him in Chicago, too.
Yeah, and then I had a very nice relationship when he was bishop here, which was later. Yeah, so I worked there, and then I worked at Parallel Express, and those were both relatively unpleasant jobs. I would come home and just feel, I talked to her and said, I'm working these jobs, I feel stupid. I'm not stupid. What's going on here? And they just really didn't fit for me. And I'm not going to go into details why. But
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you know Jerry Bollock in the Buddhist bookstore?
Sure.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Did you ever see Ananda over there?
Well, I knew Ananda because at that point also we had something called the Buddhist Council of Northern California. And this is something that was really organized by Ananda and Ken Tanaka. And I was quite involved in that. So I got to spend time with both of them.
Uh-huh. Who's Ken Tanaka?
Ken Tanaka is a Jodo Shinshu priest who had he was on the faculty of Institute of Buddhist Studies. He had a PhD in Buddhist Studies from Stanford. Totally great guy and a very, very good friend. And he moved to Japan about 20 years ago to teach there. But we're still in touch.
Oh.
And so that was a whole other little network that I really appreciated meeting people. Also, some of the other Jodo Shinshu priests and some other monks from a couple of the Theravada centers. It was a great experience. So, I got a job working kind of as assistant to my younger brother at a place called Wilderness Travel. And that I really liked. That was fun. It's like I didn't have any responsibility. I just did editorial work and things that were in my wheelhouse. And I got paid. And that was fine. And that all went really well until the first Gulf War. So we're talking about early 91, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the first Gulf War happened, nobody was traveling anywhere. And so about half of the staff got laid off. And I got laid off. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And then, do you know Albert Cutchins?
Yeah.
So Albert, who was a friend from that practice period at Tassajara, told me, there's a job opening at Buddhist Peace Fellowship that I think you would be good for. And I applied for that as basically director. And I got the job. And that was in the early winter of 91. And that was kind of this other piece of the puzzle of my life that fell into place. It was a perfect job for me. And it happened at a time when, during that time, Buddhist Teachers Fellowship membership grew substantially. And we had, a growing presence in the Buddhist world in this country. And it also connected me through some of the people who were on the board to the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And that was also tremendously significant. So I began, I guess, in the spring of 92, I went to my first International Network of Engaged Buddhist conference in Thailand. And as I've told many times, it happened that Sulak Sivraksa was in exile at that time. He fled arrest in Thailand. And
who was he?
Sulak Sivraksa is one of the really major figures of Asian engaged Buddhism or world engaged Buddhism. And he's been a mentor to me for more than 30 years. He's 90 now. He just turned 90 like 2 weeks ago. He's a writer. He's a Buddhist practitioner. He's an activist. And he's a provocateur. And so he's several times he's gotten arrested for supposedly insulting the king.
Don't want to do that in Thailand.
Yeah. No. And he was very, very well known in Thailand. And so it turns out that when I went to Thailand for the first time, I left, and he was staying, when he was in exile, he stayed with us for a couple of months in our house. And so he said goodbye to me at the door while I went off to his country. And that involvement has been really also active and steady for more than 30 years. And so I had this, this job at Buddhist Peace Fellowship just opened so many doors of connection, because in a certain way, one of my great pleasures is in networking, in connecting people with other people that I think they might want to know. And
you've helped us.
This just opened up, so many more potential connections, which have borne fruit. And I'm always, I'm just doing that because I enjoy it. I hear from somebody and I say, oh, you should know so-and-so. And I did that just this week. Somebody in my, I'm teaching a class at Union Theological Seminary, and I told someone, oh, you should know James Ford because he's a Unitarian Universalist minister and a Zen teacher, and you should talk with him. So that's what I naturally do. And so that was our life I was pretty much steadily involved with BPF for about 15 years. And in those times, I went through various practice positions here, and I was on the San Francisco Zen Center board. I was on Bernie Glassman's board. But my home was here. I did a practice period with Aiken Roshi in Hawaii. I got connected and did sesshin with Shodo Harada. That connection was sort of a double connection. It was like both, I feel, if my memory is right, both Yvonne and Jan Bays, Chosen Bays, really encouraged me to connect with Harada Roshi. And I did. And when I instantly connected with him, it was great. And now, my son is connected with him.
Oh, no. I didn't know.
My son, Alex Genbo is his name. He lived at Sogenji for a year and a half.
Wow.
During the pandemic. And, he's still quite connected with Roshi and Chisan. But he did that. He made that connection on his own. It didn't have anything to do with me. So, we have a very rich life.
Yeah.
I moved through all these positions, and at a certain point, when shortly after Mayazumi Roshi died, which I think was in 95. Yeah, that must have been right. Dojin invited Maylee Scott and myself to prepare for Dharma transmission. Because he hadn't transmitted anyone from Berkeley yet, and he was wanting to, he wanted to secure succession here. And so we went through that process for a few years, and In 98, Meili and I were transmitted at Tassajara. And I guess around that time, we were also appointed together. We were co-tantos. And so we had that position. And then Meili decided she really wanted to move to Argata. This was a Sangha she had been working with, and I think she felt, probably correctly, that there was not going to be a place for her in Berkeley to really teach the way she wanted to teach. And she was right. There wasn't, and in a sense, there wasn't for me either, but I was younger than her, and I was not as tuned into that. And so she moved up to Arcata, and then shortly she was diagnosed with colon cancer, and went very quickly. So I was then the sole tanto, and then I was the vice abbot. But there was no I'm trying to figure out what I want to say here, or what I don't, because what I do and don't want to go on the record. But at any rate, what happened was that Sojin had confidentially named me as successor. But he didn't tell anybody, which is fine. And I didn't tell anybody. And then somehow...
Well, how could you tell anybody you didn't know?
No, I did know.
Oh, you did know.
He told me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got it.
But all I could say is, and then it leaked out. And I will say, it didn't leak from me. And that was challenging, because people had all kinds of feelings about it. And nobody knew when this was going to happen. And he wasn't thinking straight about it. And all this took a couple of years. Took a couple of years for the senior students to kind of work out our relationships, which we pretty much have. To where there wasn't it wasn't backbiting. There wasn't negativity or too much competitiveness. But it took a lot of work on everybody's part. And then at a certain point, he made it known that he was planning to die with his boots on. And that's what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, it really seemed to me like he should have passed on the abbotship before he did, but I didn't really feel critical. I just thought that's what I thought.
Well, yeah. Well, but what I feel really great about is that I always felt that not just me, but the Sangha had this wonderful capacity. When he stepped back, we stepped forward. So for example, one of the real important elements, I think, of our growth as a Sangha was when he was co-abbot of San Francisco. Because he was gone a lot. And it was fine. When he was gone, we learned to take responsibility. And people had space to learn to become teachers. So that wasn't a plan of his, but that was an artifact of events. So that was really good. And what I feel great about in the last, over the last 4 years is that we weathered his illness and gave him space to do what he wanted and to teach as he wanted. And he did, the last period of his life, he was very alive.
Yeah.
His teaching was really good, and he gave a very strong dose of it to people.
Yeah.
Before, a relatively swift decline at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to do a stepping down ceremony with him. And all of the rituals around mountain seed were really well done by the community in the midst of the pandemic. And so we weathered the pandemic and grew as a community. And we weathered his death, his loss, and the transition to a new abbot, and kept practice alive, kept growing as a Sangha. We didn't experience sort of spiritual crisis or economic crisis. There's something really solid that he had, just a very durable cloth that he had woven together into a community that has just enabled us to make these transitions. And that's kind of where we've come to now.
Berkeley Zen Center has always been my favorite Zen center. I love being over there.
Well, it's pretty good. And we just had Buddha's birthday. It was just such a fantastic feeling, a lot of people showed up, and there was just a joy and energy in how we did the ceremony. And I'm reminded that when we do things as a community, it's like that. And we're making it, there's a transition, there's inevitable transition happening, because a lot of the key people are aging out or having illness, and there are new, younger people who are coming that are figuring out how to, how to really fold into the practice. And I'm really committed to that. And I'm committed to being a more wide diversity of people practicing here. And that's happening also.
Yeah. What do you mean by a wider diversity of people there?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, in a demographic sense, there are matters of age, there's matters of race and ethnicity, and just seeing different faces in the Zendo.
Yeah. Well, how do How do you do that? How do you do more than just have a place and be open to
Well,
whoever comes?
you do that. You do that in a couple different ways, and this is all things that some of us, or the Sangha as a whole, is thinking about. So, first of all, we've been involved in a process called Many Communities, One Sangha, which was a program that was developed by a couple of people in connection with East Bay Meditation Center, by Musha Mikeda and Crystal Johnson and Rhonda McGee. Rhonda McGee is a Zen student who's a law professor in the city. Wonderful woman, African American. And it's a process for, first of all, uncovering subtle and not so subtle ways that we carry unconscious bias, which makes it difficult to be. It creates barriers to inclusion, even though the intentions may be there. Mm-hmm. So we've been involved in this 9-month process, meeting monthly, and in both in small groups and in whole groups, and just investigating these issues of equity and inclusion. So that's a necessary step. That's a step of, really examining one's mind, affecting how one thinks about things, which of course is at the heart of our practice. Mm-hmm. As we go on, I think that what we need to figure out how to do is to, the more people who look one way or the other in the Zendo, and they can see each other, the more comfortable people they're going to feel there. So if there's African American people there, they're gonna look around. I do this, it's like I found myself doing this 30 years ago, actually at an INEP conference. Within the first 2 days, it was mostly Asian, with some Westerners. Then in the first 2 days, everybody that was Jewish figured out who else was Jewish, and signified that we recognized each other. And I think that's true for other ethnic groups. Some are more and some are less visible. So we change the minds of the practitioners. We create a space where people can see themselves and don't feel marginalized. And then the hardest step, I think, is to affect the structures of the organization, which means who's in leadership positions, who's in teaching positions, and change that from being, bluntly put, a white space. And that's the long-term perspective. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. we're just working on this. I'm not in any rush. We're not panicked about this. We're just doing it quite methodically, step by step. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we've got 30 people doing this Many Communities, One Sangha program, and we're going to do a second year of it for a new cohort of people, and it's going quite well. It's a deep process. And I will say it's something I feel grateful that I'm in a place where I can help this happen.
Yeah. You know what occurs to me is that the from the first, when the first, I'm thinking of mid-60s, when Buddhism was really attracting a lot of people, there was just one type of Buddhism that had a real demographically mixed membership, that had a lot of people of color and Asians and everything. And that's Soka Gakkai.
Yes.
And they got that way by recruiting, by proselytizing, by anytime you hear a black athlete or entertainer is a Buddhist, it's almost always Nichiren Shoshu Soka Gakkai. You know, they've split in some ways. I forget. And it's because of recruiting. They went there, and they'd be out on the street, on Market Street, asking people to come in, and they wanted everybody. The Zen Center has, it was never that way. It was like when you asked about it, they said, find a blank wall and stare at it. It was not a place that was trying to attract people. It took people who found it, which would tended to be intellectuals, college educated, people who had read about it, not people who'd somebody come up to and said, hi, would you like to have a free dinner and meet some friends of mine and hear a talk?
Yeah, well, I agree, and I don't think we're about to move in that direction, but I think that there's another, to me, my experience is there's another move that one can make.
Yeah.
And which is to build connections across the cultures. For example, to build connections with churches.
Yeah.
To build connections across our cultures. So one of the things at an SCBA conference a couple of years ago, Io Yatunde, who's an African American teacher, suggested to the membership of the ASCB, the SCBA, at one of our talks, said, if you really want to know how people are living and thinking that are different than you, why don't you go to a black church and go to Bible study? And I thought that was really interesting, so I did it. I went to, I did Bible study for about 6 months at an evangelical church near me in Berkeley, and it was fascinating. It was really good. I learned a lot. I was welcomed. I think it was a bit of a conundrum to me to them that I was a Buddhist, but they were very open.
Yeah,
they were very open, and I feel like making a connection across these cultural and religious lines is really smart.
I've gone to Oakland to black churches just to hear the music.
Well, yeah,
unbelievable. Daryl Coley and the Gospel Elites were just outstanding. I can't remember if I heard him in a church. I think I heard him in a church. And there was another group that was really great. But the black churches, they had very sophisticated, Stevie Wonder type beautiful chord changes and just very, really great. And of course, so much American music was influenced by gospel, from, Elvis Presley to Ray Charles and so much. Just wonderful. But the evolution of gospel, that I experienced in Oakland was just wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
I hired a gospel group for background singers on something, on Freeze Please.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Anyway, I think there's different ways to go about this, but I don't think we're about to go onto the street and recruit.
Right. Well, another thing that Soka Gakkai had, that had the same thing that Hare Krishna had, which was something simple to chant. And so you'd go to that meeting and eat with them, and people would be friendly and do what the Moonies called love bombing.
Right.
And then you'd sit there, and Soka Gakkai, you just have to go, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho. And it was like a magical chant. So it was really a visceral feeling thing. It wasn't, Zen just offered so little. It needs a Keizan, huh? The guy who popularized it in Japan.
Right.
Before Keizan, it was more of an elite thing.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of where we're at here in Berkeley these days.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, more power to you there. What about legal problems? America is such a legalistic culture. At Berkeley Zen Center had problems with lawsuits for discrimination or stuff like that, or threats that have been a problem?
Knocking on wood, no.
Good for you. That can really throw a monkey wrench in the works.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And but no, we haven't really had that problem.
Yeah.
We've had other difficulties. We've had situations where we had to have or we felt people were abusive, or we had to ask some people to leave, or just inappropriate, but nothing that's escalated too far.
Yeah. Yeah, Zen Center, San Francisco Zen Center, there was a guy who was very sad and kept trying. He couldn't really relate, but he kept trying, and finally he killed himself just a block away in his car when he couldn't go in. Nobody knows that, I guess. It's forgotten.
I hadn't heard that, but I know of other complexities around Zen Center. So.
Right. The police. The police came to me. I was work leader, and the police. Came, or at some point anyway, they came and showed me pictures and asked me about it. I told them about him. It was very sad.
Well, we had a murder.
Oh.
Across the street of a member.
Really?
As she was getting into her car. Yeah, it's sort of a very somebody that we knew very well.
And what year?
This was probably about 8 years ago.
Oh, that recently. Zen Center's had several murders and
I know.
And shootings.
This was very shocking, but this is not the safest neighborhood. There have been, to my count, 3 murders on this block.
Mm.
You know, over the years, over the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Not only this is the only one that involved a member.
Oh, wow. When I took over the Green Gulch Greengrocer, like 2 weeks after it had opened on Page and Laguna, catty corner from the Zen Center City Center, I was running a grocery store where 3 people had been murdered.
Yeah, that's a tough corner.
Michael McClure called me the designated victim or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a hard job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we're done for tonight.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. But we can't end with me telling about. We can't end on murder. You have to conclude with something else.
Well, what I would conclude is that at Zen Center and at Berkeley Zen Center, the thing is that there are tragedies, there are losses, there are, we've all been living through this terrible pandemic in which so many people died, so many people were harmed, but the practice continues. The practice has not been wounded. The practice is thriving.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing, is to recognize the resilience of that practice and how lucky we are to have been brought by Suzuki Roshi, by all of our Japanese teachers, and also by all the Western teachers that we've had. Now, it's going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so we have losses, we have setbacks, wounds, but the practice is so robust. It's really great.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky to have that.
Yeah. Now, I do want to ask something else. Your Tassajara couldn't open its guest season this summer because was that last summer? I'm sorry, because
this summer I think.
Well,
there's not a guest season.
Well, where are we? We're not in. Well, we're in April. God, they're not doing it again.
They're doing Sangha weeks. That's all.
And they couldn't get enough people to come there to run the guest season the way they wanted. It was
right.
They easily could have run it, but they wanted it in a way that left the practice intact, and it just would have been too much. It seems to have, and it's sort of like a shift in the way people practice and live more than Zen is dying out. It's like it's taking different forms, and people are relating in different ways, and they're not coming and staying and staying and staying. They're moving on to other things, and I don't know, stuff like that. If there was a sociological analysis of it, it could state it more clearly. Have you noticed that over in Berkeley?
Well, yes. What I've noticed is that I'm trying to get my head around what are the different orientations towards practice that are emerging now, that are different from how it was, say, when you or I came to practice. And one of those things is that it's the economic circumstances of young people are really different than when we kick off practice.
That's true.
There's so much more pressure, and so it's like you have to be, you would have to be all in, and you'd have to, people are thinking about their student debts. They're thinking about what kinds of money they might need, and it's harder for people just to say, well, I'm going to take off this year or this 2 years and live in this circumstance. That's just really hard.
I didn't think anything. I had no worry about the future at all. I was sort of like with the hippie wave or something in the mid-'60s. It never occurred to me.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that much.
Yeah.
But I see what my son is doing, and he's really devoted to practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's challenging for him.
Mm.
But, I have faith in him, and I hope that we will work out a way so that people can really enter practice in a thoroughgoing way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also think that one of the things that's happening, this is a whole other discussion, but I think that we're developing styles of leadership and teaching that are not necessarily strictly focused on a single personality.
Yeah.
In other words,
ain't it true?
There's more collective leadership.
Yeah.
And I will say, I don't think we know quite how that's going to unfold yet.
Right.
I don't think all the ballots have been counted. While I really support this form of leadership and look to build a sense of collectivity among the teachers, so we don't know yet. It may be that the models of leadership that we had from Mel and Reb and Suzuki Roshi, et cetera, it may be that they were right, that's the model that we need to transmit Zen, but we don't know that yet.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about it. It'll take it's like water flowing, it'll take its own course. What worked?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really good you're there. I thank you for the connections you've given us in Asia.
Sure.
Hey, I hope there's a International Buddhist Peace Conference here. That'd be great. And maybe you'd come to it.
Perhaps sooner or later here in Bali. Well, actually, there's supposed to be one. There's supposed to be one in Jakarta.
Wow. Jakarta.
Yeah, I'm just not. I don't know if I'm going to go. I'm not sure what traveling I'm up for these days.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, I'm there. I'm not interested. But if you went to Jakarta, I might fly. I can fly to Jakarta pretty cheap.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. So, listen, a pleasure speaking with you. And give my love to Lori. And maybe we can talk to her sometime soon.
I'm sure she'd be happy to, yeah.
I'd love it if she would. It's hard to get women. Women are a very a high percentage of women do not want to do a podcast.
I'll mention that. I'll talk to her.
Yeah, so it makes it
All
look
right.
like it's all men, or mainly men.
Yeah.
Okay. You take
All right.
care.
Take care, David.
Yeah. Thanks
Okay.
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So thank you very much, Alan Senauke, abbot of the Berkeley Zen Center. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives. And I noticed my voice is it's pretty good for recording right now. You know why? Because I've got a cold. Yeah, to just keep it. Do all my get a cold and do all my recording then. Anyway, so we're coming to you from Sleepy Senor with Doggy Bandita, guest doggy Boom Boo. And tomorrow's her last day. Her owners are coming to pick her up after 3 months, I think. Last year was 6 months. And Clay and April and baby Isla, my son, his mate, their baby, are in Ubud. They went water rafting today. And he said, "You're right. It's the best thing to do here." Yeah, it's really great. I call it senior citizen water rafting. It's not like a lot of the water rafting you might know of in other parts of the world. It's, most of the time you could get, just any time you can get out and walk to shore, or even if it's a deep pool, it isn't very long. But they wear you out. They're about 2 hours long. There's 3 different runs. And they wear you out. They're pretty cool. So anyway, all of them and dear, lovely Katrinka, we're all wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.